Hello, I'm Gregory, the second grandson of Hallie Ward, my maternal grandmother. The Ward branch of our family tree is special for me because when I was growing up, I got to know Grana quite intimately. These memories were the beginnings of my deep interest in our family history. So, I want to pass on Grana's stories and memories, as well as those of the Ward family beginnings in America to her great and second great grandchildren. Grana was special, not only because her McCosco grandchildren were a little scared of her, but also because she was the one grandparent who we really got to know.
She would regularly drive up from Pittsburgh to Berea in her Mercury convertible, and we'd sit around the kitchen table talking about the relatives. She had a story, often more than one story, about every relative in our family. She encouraged, she forced me to try things that were new and sometimes nerve-wracking. When I was 10, she and I drove down to Florida, where I spent the winter of 1957-58 with her. She put the maps in my lap and said, "Gregory, you're going to give me directions." When I directed her through the middle of Jacksonville and we had to stay at an expensive motel, she was not happy. But we took the cheaper room with a double bed, and sleeping next to her was the first of many new experiences that I had that winter. She toughened me up. The school I went to was too far to walk, and after driving me once, she got out an old bicycle and set me off, often in the dark, to pedal 45 minutes to my 5th grade class.
Grana was no nonsense, and you simply had to do exactly as she demanded. But I wouldn't let her always get the best of me. I drove down to Deerfield with Grana 3 months after I learned that I was diabetic. I had just learned to give myself a shot in my leg every morning. If I wanted to get back at Grana, I would ask her to give me a shot in my arm. I didn't care how much it hurt, because I knew it made Grana feel very uncomfortable giving me a shot.
She also pointed me in new directions. With Grana listening, I read Mark Twain aloud to her every night. First Tom Sawyer and then Huckleberry Finn. Mornings she and I made breakfast, teaching me how to fry eggs and to make pancakes from scratch. When she was 70, Grana took her first trip to Europe, which was when I got to know another side of her. To help her pay for her trip, she bought a 1964 VW 1500 station wagon, which, after touring Europe, she shipped home. In August, Chris and I joined her on a tour down and then up the boot of Italy. Grana and her traveling partner, Ruth Awnins, would rent a room while Chris and I slept in the car. Once, when we bunked at a youth hostel, Grana and Ruth slept in the car. Ruth was not pleased. Near Monte Cassino, when the temperature reached 80, we stopped and bought a big watermelon. Grana asked for a knife, cut it into quarters, and finished every slice of her quarter. That summer, I had been living with the Brauns in West Berlin, and twice Grana drove to see me there. One special memory stands out from walks and talks with Grana around Berlin. "Gregory," she said, "I am English, Dutch, Irish, and French," which ignited my interest in our family history. Of all our ancestors, Grana has the deepest roots in America. Here, I will only address her father's tree, which includes the English and Irish branches that she bragged about. Her mother, Rebecca Lowe, could trace her history back to Dutch New York, the Mayflower, and to France. Although we'll see that, no surprise, Grana exaggerated a bit. I'll begin with John William Ward, Hallie Ward's grandfather. Born in Preston, Lancashire County, England in August 1828, and named for his grandfather. Preston was their home for just a year, suggesting an early life of uncertainty. Shortly after John's birth, they returned and settled permanently in Wolverhampton. Being the second son, perhaps he felt misplaced in the family because at 17 or 18, he left England for the 2 to 3 week crossing to America. None of his brothers, sisters, uncles, or aunts, nor any of their progeny, joined John in America. This and some other life events seem to suggest that he was a loner.
His first documented reference in America is in Wisconsin in the Ward family Bible. But his wife's and our second great-grandmother's name is not mentioned there.
And the only way I learned her name, Bridget Schneck, was on great-grandfather Tom's 1925 death certificate. Bridget is the Irish in Grana's English, Dutch, Irish, and French. Tom and his sister Susan stated in a number of censuses that their mother was Irish. But Grana's older sister Mary left us the deepest information about Bridget. She was Irish Catholic, and she met John on the passage to America. After the couple reached Wisconsin, John may have regretted this marriage. She spoke Gaelic and little English. He was Church of England and she was Irish Catholic. A Church of England Catholic marriage in the 1840s was a rarity in England, and certainly questionable on the Wisconsin frontier. The evidence of his regret: there is no grave or record of her death, and there is no mother of Tom or his older sister Susan given in John Ward's family Bible. Second great-grandmother Bridget is a significant mystery in our family tree. Because the surname Schneck is definitely not Irish, I had DNA analyzed by Irish Origins, a genetic database. They are confident that her name was not Schneck, but Shinnick.
Our DNA had significant hits in the southern Catholic county of Cork, where the Shinnick clan originated. There is a large family of Shinnicks there in a place called Gortafludig, which might be worth investigating. However, our parents' roots are only 4% Irish and 19% Scotch.
So Bridget Shinnick's ancestors may include Catholic immigrants from Scotland who went to Cork in the 1700s. Background on John and Bridget's 7-year marriage is cloudy, but we do know that the couple left Highland in 1850, fearing a cholera epidemic that was sweeping through Wisconsin. Susan, their daughter, was born in East St. Louis, Illinois in December 1850, after which the family returned to Highland, where their son Tom was born in 1852. Like his father John, Thomas was named for his English grandfather. Again, Bridget will remain a mystery until more County Cork Irish join the 23andMe or the ancestry databases, and a Shinnick relative makes a match with DNA. Aunt Mary told us that Bridget had a third child, a girl, who died at birth, and this may well have been the cause of Bridget's death, just 2 years after Tom was born. A year later, John married again. Not a surprise, because Wisconsin was on the frontier when a big family was critical to managing a farm. John's new wife, Mary Faust, was not an immigrant, but a pioneer, born in western Pennsylvania in 1827. In her mid-20s, she moved further west with her family to Illinois, and then alone to Wisconsin. There, she joined her younger sister, Lydia, in Highland, who, in 1848, was married to William Huxtable. John Ward and Mary Faust married in 1854 and soon had 2 sons and 2 daughters. In August 1862, John enlisted for 3 years in the Union Army. He was our only direct ancestor who fought in the Civil War. Why did he volunteer a year to the day after his 5th child, Francis, was born? Married men with children weren't being drafted. Our Faust Ward ancestors passed down a story that, while in training, John tired of the war. In an argument over family leave, he struck his captain in the face and left for home. Then, on March 9, 1863, 7 months after enlisting, John mustered as a first sergeant into the 27th Wisconsin, an ethnically German regiment. They marched south through Kentucky to take part in the siege of Vicksburg. After capturing and occupying Little Rock on March 15, 1864, John was court-martialed, reason unclear, and demoted to private. He was confined until August and then assigned to the quartermaster traveling with the regiment to New Orleans and Texas. John learned wagon making, which may be the source of his trade as carpenter, which he listed on his 1870 and 80 censuses. John mustered out in August 1865. He spent the next 15 years moving back and forth between Grant and Iowa counties in Wisconsin, siring 5 more children, farming, and working as a carpenter. In 1880, John and family, including his firstborn, Susan, and her husband, Gottfried Kurtz, pioneered west in a covered wagon. The family kept a travel diary, the first entry in Wisconsin in April, and the last in northwestern Colorado in mid-June. How they ended up in Spink County, South Dakota, is unclear, but they settled near the James River, living in an in-ground sod house. There, our second great step-grandmother, Mary Faust Ward, died just a year after leaving Wisconsin. John's children left stories of their frontier life. The first about Lakota chief Drifting Goose. Also, great-grandfather John had a dispute over 155 homesteaded acres. John mustered out as a private, but he made sure that his South Dakota neighbors knew that he served as a first sergeant.
Flashing back to when great-grandfather Tom was in his teens, he left Highland.
Perhaps to find himself. He may have lived on Lake Michigan in 1870, but in 1876, Tom turned up in Vinton, Iowa, where he married Rebecca Lowe. Why Vinton? Well, you need some backstory. In 1860, when Tom was 8, 4 years after his mother died and 3 years after his father remarried, he was living nearby with his stepmother's sister, Lydia Faust Huxtable. Lydia had 1 daughter, born in 1849, but was childless for the rest of her life. And Tom became a surrogate son. When John left for the Civil War in 1863, sisters Mary and Lydia probably raised their 6 children together. In 1870, around the time when Tom left Highland, Wisconsin, Lydia and William Huxtable relocated to farm in Vinton, Iowa. And after Tom's wanderings, It should be no surprise that he settled down near his favored Aunt Lydia. The Huxtables may have introduced Tom to Rebecca Lowe, who Tom wed in the Huxtable parlor. They also helped Tom buy a farm. I remember Grana and Mom talking fondly about Tom's Auntie Huxtable. Although Tom and Rebecca had a son, William, in 1878, Tom's wanderlust did not ebb. In 1880, he moved the family to Nebraska to farm, and when wife Rebecca returned alone to Vinton, he visited his family and sister Susan in South Dakota. Tom was eager to settle in South Dakota, but Rebecca preferred to be close to the family in Vinton, where they returned to farm. Uncle Will was their only child for 13 years, when Rebecca lost a second child in a breech birth in 1891. Two daughters followed in quick succession, Aunt Mary and our grandmother, Hallie Beatrice Ward, the caboose baby. Tom gave up farming and followed Rebecca to Cedar Falls, where she opened a rooming house. She had 20 to 30 boarders, mostly women, who attended nearby at Iowa State Teachers College. We can see how rumors and boarding were passed on, first to Hallie in Pittsburgh, and then to my mother, Mary Jean. Our family had rumors upstairs during the first years in our big house in Berea. Aunt Nancy gives us some early history of Rebecca Lowe, her aunt and our great-grandmother, and about Aunt Mary and how moving from a farm to Cedar Falls changed her cousin Hallie.
Rather early, I think Aunt Beck made up her mind that they must be educated. I think my mother, having been a teacher, that may have had something to do with it. Aunt Beck must have realized that if the children had an education, she must be the one that would work it out. The country school where your Grana went to school, I went with her. She was the queen of the school. She was very vivacious. She told everybody anything they wanted to know, and really like the leader. Now, meanwhile, the brother Will, he'd heard about that people that lived in the town took the students as roomers. Aunt Beck began very early. She had about 30 people, boarders, as the house was full of roomers. The work was divided between the two daughters, Mary and Hallie. Their job always to wash all the dishes. And meanwhile, they were both going to training school where I had gone, where I went later. And we always liked each other and got along. I was very much impressed by all of this. And Hallie and Mary were very close together in terms of years, had the same room, were like sisters. They were very different from each other. Mary would talk as though she was everybody's mother. They were all doing the dishes and laugh, and Hallie would work. They didn't disagree. They both worked. Mary was very much more in manner like her father. Hallie would invariably have bows, and Mary didn't have any. She would sit and rock, but Hallie would bring the bows home. It was my job. Whenever there was company, which was all the time, I was always the one that played and sang. And that was how, when your grandfather, he could sing, and I was certainly there to play the accompaniment.
During World War I, great-grandfather Tom was encouraged to leave town because he spoke too favorably of the Germans. This was a mysterious period when he would go for long stays at a cottage on Lake Pontchartrain near New Orleans. When he returned, here's what Aunt Nancy had to say about Tom.
Something was the matter with Uncle Tom. The family never spoke about it very much. He couldn't work. The family didn't think there was very much to this. I do not know whether there was or wasn't, but I do know that he would sit in the living room their house and rock. As I've told you before, he was extremely hospitable.
I remember the Wards from an Iowa family reunion in 1957. One night there, we stayed with Uncle Will, Grana's brother, and Aunt Geneva. He was like a father to Grana, and probably the only person to whom she never talked back. I was 10, and I remember that he gave me an apple to feed to a horse in his backyard. At a large family meal, Aunt Geneva said grace over a long table. I thought she would never say amen.
He and his wife always lived a half a mile from. He was a good farmer, and her name was Geneva. And she was a great cook and always was so hospitable. So you always had one meal with Geneva. When I was a little girl, because whenever I appeared, he would get a hold of me and set me up on his shoulder and make a great deal over me. Of course, I liked it too, and I always put up on his shoulder.
Grana's sister, Mary, was a teacher and a librarian. At 37, married Frank Harlan, they adopted a son, Donald. Will and Geneva had no children. You can learn much more about Grana's earlier life in the Olander family tree video and in Aunt Nancy's When Hallie Met Herb. Uncle Martin's video has memories describing Grana's success in Pittsburgh real estate. After passing on Olander housing to Uncle Ward, Hallie moved permanently to Deerfield Beach in the late 1950s. There she met Nicholas Frank Lasko, a Jewish immigrant from Budapest. He married in America, had 3 children,
And Frank was a tailor in Yonkers, New York.
He retired to Pompano, Florida in 1959, and after his wife Julia died in 1962, he married Grana in 1965, when he was 78 and she was 71. She changed quite a bit from the Grana we remember, becoming more relaxed after moving in with Frank. Frank had a wonderful grapefruit and an orange tree in his backyard. The two of them traveled to Europe, but in the 1970s, with Grana at the wheel on Long Island, they had a pretty serious accident. After 9 years together, Frank passed in January 1974, and Grana followed in June. She was 80 years old, and Mary Jean relates those last months of her life.
I remember going into the hospital and she said, would you want any organs harvested? Would you like to bequeath any of your organs to? And she says, what kind of organ would I have to bequeath? She was 80, I said, oh, no, Grana, you have a very sharp tongue. Maybe we could do your tongue. That's so funny. We were afraid of him. And he was the only one that ever could handle her.
When they split, and my father moved to Oakland and took Martin and I, we don't want to go with my mother. So. And I'm sure she didn't want us because she had to make money.
The best way to end the Ward branch of our family tree is with some Grana stories. After the Second World War, Uncle Martin drove with Grana to California.
Oh, the Californians. Mother had a red Buick convertible. The only problem was it burned oil. The smoke just rolled out. And the reason that we went to California was because it was right after the war, 1946, and California didn't have any cars. And she could have this car here, take it out to California and sell it for a profit. And that would make her trip. Ward and I and herself. And Ward slept in the back and I was up front. One time I remember we stopped in Denver. Trust Mother, she found a basement. I guess it was about 2 in the morning we got to sleep. The funniest story that I ever heard was we were in the Rockies and Mother had to go to the bathroom Mother went off into the side of the road, and wouldn't you know, a car came up while we were sitting there. The headlights shone, and there was Mother with her pants down. We got a big kick out of that. Acted like a farmer's daughter.
Grana was remembered by many outside our family.
And Grana was the most exceptional grandmother. I remember one trip down the field, and Grana wanted a ride in the motorcycle. Helmet on Grana. And you can imagine how Grandma was, yes, and she was tough and a snail. So I took her for a ride up to Delray. And about halfway between Boca and Delray, Grandma's tapping me on the shoulder. And she kept on saying, Mike, can't you go any faster? Mike, go faster, go faster. So I went from 30 to 60. Mike, go faster, to 70. At 85, the bike would not go any faster. And Grana came back, and she had her grin here, and she probably looked more like a chimpanzee with a helmet on.
I think the best way to end the Ward branch of our family tree, the family gathering to memorialize Hallie Ward Olander.
For the first thing, of course, they put the ashes around a tree, and that was nice. And they said, "And you boys sang." And then they put some of the ashes in a rocket and shot her up in the rocket. And somebody said, "Well, that may be the closest she gets to heaven." And the rocket. I've told more people about that. Oh boy. Well, it was, it was funny, and it was just like Grana probably would have liked it. And then we all sat around in that farm place and talked about Grana. And the thing that was so funny was that usually it's something like that. People only always say nice things. But that time they were talking about some of the not so good things, like Teddy talked about how she made him change from left-handed to right-handed. And, that was pretty, it was a funny affair, I thought.
So, I've given you some history of the Ward branch of our family tree. Altogether, the Ward, Olander, and McCosco branches have been in America for 7 generations. However, our family tree has one final branch, Hallie Ward's maternal branch, that has even deeper roots in America. Grana's mother, Rebecca Lowe, born in Franklin County, Indiana in 1853, is our connection to ancestors that go back another 8 generations. Her maternal grandmother, Mary Ann Freeman, traces her roots to the Mayflower and to Plymouth Rock. Grana's grandfather, Samuel Lowe, has a quite colorful background in Dutch New Amsterdam. So you can see that Grana's mother's branch has the very first settlers on this side of the Atlantic. That's 15 generations, reaching back more than 400 years. I've covered the history of the most recent 7, and I'm leaving more than half of our family history in America to my generation's 46 children and grandchildren to explore. Best of luck.